Welcome to the Virtual Power Teams podcast, now with AI. And today we have a very exciting guest, Malte Krohn. He's a consultant, AI human-centric consultant. He's a representative of the Chamber of Commerce in Hamburg. And he's an ecosystem builder, something quite trendy now. We live more in a systemic world and ecosystem. So, Malte, it's a real honor to have you with us on the podcast. But please tell us with your own words who you are and what you do.
Thank you so much for having me, Peter, and the first introduction. And as you said, right now I'm a consultant and representative at Hamburg Chamber of Commerce. And the topic that I really dive into and represent also for the chamber is artificial intelligence. Our team, we are working on two topics, which is artificial intelligence and cybersecurity, but my responsibility is really the AI part. And as you can imagine, and as you know yourself, there's a lot going on there. So what would you like to know?
Hmm, interesting. Let's start maybe, and we've met on an event of the Chamber of Commerce that was about ethical AI, and we will certainly touch about the ethical side of AI. But let's first start. What do you see is the biggest impact of AI on leadership?
To be honest, that's really a part, that's really a topic where we are just, so to say, scratching the surface in our work, I would say. I believe that giving like a little bit of a historical overview that I mean there were many specialists and technical people who worked with AI or technologies that are probably now summarized under the umbrella term AI for decades. And as we all know, in 2022 this hype wave started, and I believe that this year was really the year where most companies figured out that they have to do something with AI. What I observe a
Mhm,
little bit is that that also kind of represents their strategy. Like, we need to do something with AI. And the
mhm,
challenge that I see is that these to many of these tools are really powerful. So I don't know about you, but I frequently have these experiences where like, oh my God, I didn't know I could do that with technology, or I see other people. To give you an example, I have one lecture is called Strategy and Innovation at the Hamburg School of Business Administration. So beside
mhm,
that's my side my side quest is giving lectures. Um,
mhm,
and in this lecture, the students basically developed their own startup idea over 8 weeks. And 4 weeks ago, one of my students would come to me and she was like, "Oh my God, Malte, I launched a website." And I was like, "Okay, so what happened? What happened? Why are you so nervous?" Like, "Yeah, I used this Canva vibe coding tool where I just prompted, like, build me a landing page. This is our product. This is our pricing." And then I clicked build, and then it built the website, and it also had a public domain. And she was like, "Oh my God, now the prices are there." And what about the data, all the data protection stuff, which is a big deal in Europe, as you know, and especially in
mhm,
Germany. And she was super nervous. And I was like, "Okay, we'll figure it out." I don't know how to get it off there. I clicked a little bit around. I was like, most startup really struggle with being found. You won't have a problem with this website being online for 10 minutes. Just write the support service, and then they were able to get it down. But, these kinds of experiences where people who have no
mhm,
idea how to build a website just do it with a couple of clicks. So I believe these tools are very powerful. And my perspective on innovation usually is that and that's also the topic of my PhD, which was the crucial role of mindsets in innovation efforts, really this human-centered one, where I look at people building innovations, that they need to be empowered, they need they need space for exploration and to try things out, and space to fail, which in Germany is not always easy to get this into a culture, right? And obviously leadership who supports this, and then we also need to look of the users of innovation, the people who are impacted by it. And often, you know, in Germany, people kind of work in innovation with this solution and tech-centered view without really
mhm,
identifying problems to solve. And I'm
mhm,
saying all this because I think we're seeing a little bit that we had this AI hype, and now businesses are looking at it a little bit more from a practical perspective, and they figure out just we need to do something with AI. Won't really impact their bottom line. And now
Hmm.
I think we look at more the change management, the leadership topics, to
Hmm.
really have sustainable and holistic strategies that bring about use cases that have a return on invest on AI investments, if that makes
Hmm.
sense.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I can also share firsthand experience building things with the vibe coding tools like Replit and so on, websites and so on. Um, and it is very powerful. And initially, you have bugs. That's the current stage, probably baby stage. But then, with a good prompting and kind of asking it to fix the bugs before it bothers you and apologize every time for every new bug, you could streamline the process to some extent. And it is very powerful. It enables CEOs and equivalent to also do prototyping just using human language. But maybe now, with your hat of a representative of the Chamber of Commerce, what are actually the business owners and the managers in Hamburg addressing your department? What would be the typical needs for AI? Questions, requests? What do you think are the hot topics for them right now?
So the interesting part about my job is that the Hamburg Chamber of Commerce represents, we always say 180,000 businesses, right? This number changes. Sometimes it's just people having a tax or are registered as a business and it's not really active anymore. But the point here is that we represent restaurant owners. We
Hmm.
represent single person marketing agencies and
Hmm.
represent Bayersdorf.
Hmm.
So obviously the needs of these people, and they are all entrepreneurs,
Hmm.
right? They're very a lot, and I like this complexity and kind of diving into the needs of different people really quickly. Often means I cannot dive as deep into certain topics as specialists can, but I get a quite a big view. So in that sense, and that's also what yeah what I really deal with. We have
Hmm.
our Ausschüsse, the
Yeah, it's like
whether yeah,
committee,
like we have
commission.
these commissions where we have some people, and usually they're also quite mixed. And the other day we had somebody from the Hamburg Logistics Authority, and their the AI strategist introduced how they already in the beginning of the year thought about how their agent systems can cooperate with agent systems somewhere else in the supply chain, right? So they
Hmm.
are really advanced. But the other day I talked to a restaurant owner who was like, "Oh, I saw this talk, and they said if I don't do
Hmm.
something with AI in 3 years, I don't have a business anymore, right?" And then
Hmm.
we kind of need to come up with answers for all of these people, and that's also basically how we worked. You mentioned it that
Hmm.
I come from this human-centered innovation or human-centered design background. I was had the pleasure to learn at the D School in Stanford for a couple of years in a
Hmm.
fellowship, and not many people talk these days about design thinking anymore, and I think that's okay. There are always these
Hmm.
these words and concepts and ideas that are really hyped. But I still, when I begin working on a new topic, it's kind of my innovator's DNA to start with empathy, to talk to people, just
Hmm.
listen what's their situation, what they need, and that's what we did. I started off the job this earlier this year. That's what I did in the beginning for a couple of weeks. I just met with people I knew, and I asked them like, who else should I talk to? And one of the first things that we did, we kind of developed this AI journey in which
Hmm.
we communicate in a team, and in which we also develop our services and products, where we think about, okay, first people are kind of inspired or aware, okay, there is this thing called AI, maybe I need to do something with it in the first stage. And then we have the second stage where people start experimenting with it, maybe realizing, oh, I can really do something with it in my day-to-day work, like people or
Hmm.
businesses and or businesses. Then we have the stage where they really start learning specific skill sets, like as you said, right? Vibe coding tools. You also have to really know how to set the guide rails properly, how to set the rules for it, how to work with these tools, so we actually get proper software products out of it. We had actually
Hmm.
one a workshop last weeks about it with the Cursor ambassador, Alexander Sakharov, a German Cursor
Hmm.
ambassador, which was super interesting. But anyway, so you're on the stage where you're learning and really implementing, and that's what I said, implementing these use cases. that hopefully have a return on investment, right? And then we
Mm-hmm.
have a fourth stage, which we call like scaling and innovating, where it's not just about implementing first pilots, but really getting it into the core processes of the organization where everybody can take part in AI and even innovating business models with and for AI. So what are the needs? I really see something everywhere on this journey, and we continue to work on this to really have 1 hour webinars about prompting techniques. We have the AI ethics workshop for people like kind of want to understand more what they should do, what they can do, what they're allowed to do with AI, right? Um, we also have vibe coding workshops like last week where people start building products with AI, and we have the KI Summit. So German word would be Künstliche
Mm-hmm.
Intelligenz KI AI Summit. For those who want to search it, they need to search KI Summit, where we bring everything together, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of see needs everywhere, and we try to encourage people wherever they are to get a realistic view on this technology, what it can do, what it cannot do, what it should not do, and make really build knowledge and skills to handle it and deal with their
Mm-hmm.
business problems. And we have enough problems also as a society where AI can help.
Mm-hmm. Excellent, excellent. So from very advanced users to very junior users, the whole portfolio. And I wonder, Hamburg being a port city and with all this logistics hub and quite well organized ecosystem, we will touch upon them. And on the other hand, we know that AI is very good at optimizing supply chain and having agents talking to each other. I wonder if there will be soon kind of state-of-the-art solutions coming from Hamburg on a supply chain optimization. Are you aware of some projects in this space where maybe the Chamber of Commerce is at least matchmaking or in somehow involved?
Yes, here, as I said, I kind of look at all the businesses and all the verticals, and then sometimes I don't know the super interesting case studies in all these areas. But as I said, we had the Hamburg Logistics Authority here, and they have Hala Next, which is
Mm-hmm.
their venture builder, and I know one of their focus areas is AI, where they start
Mm-hmm.
building AI ventures. We also have the Digital Hub Logistics. I mean, all the verticals basically they focus now on AI in
Mm-hmm.
Hamburg. So specific use cases as of now would have to think about it a little bit, but I know this happening a lot, and we have these verticals and a high focus in Hamburg on these
Mm-hmm.
areas.
Excellent. You already touched upon some of the players on the ecosystem, but before
Mhm.
we go there, human-centric AI, that's your PhD in Stanford. What are the key components of a human-centric AI?
Yeah. So to details, the PhD I did at Hamburg University of Technology, the fellowship was in Stanford, and it was more innovation in general, but it gave me this tool set then to look at AI, just to be to don't mix things up. Um, One question I get sometimes is when we talk about AI and then we get into like in this innovation and change, whole change and innovation topic, people ask like, um, is AI only another innovation but just on steroids, basically? It's
Mm-hmm.
what they ask.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say yes. Like my PhD topic, what I worked on there was I worked with a German premium manufacturer, which really was in a high price segment and which was struggling in the Chinese market. And now they needed to develop new products.
Mm-hmm.
So nothing to do with AI, actually physical products. But I also worked with a lot of startups and whatsoever in different areas, digitization in the fashion industry. And I think to say AI is just another innovation would be wrong. But I think generally speaking, many things that we learned about innovation in research and in practice in the last decades also applies to AI. So I think
Mm-hmm.
human-centered AI for me means um, if we look at an organization and we want it to use our AI, then we need to look at its people. Like who are
Mm-hmm.
the ones adopting it early, focus on them, empower them. Who are the ones who are maybe a little bit restrictive, leave them space, talk about their fears. Who are the ones and you have this in any kind of innovation. Maybe you you want to share your experiences, but there will always be people who will be reluctant, and it makes absolutely no sense to, try to convince them of something they just don't want to do. So that's
Mm-hmm.
one human-centered perspective that you could take, like when it comes to this empowering and transforming an organization for AI. So looking at the people, what are their needs, what are their skill sets, what are their wishes, what are their fears, and working from there. But also another very important perspective when I talk about human-centered AI is also what is what are we using AI for? What is AI doing to us? Um, so lots in Germany, lots of venture capital, a lot of startup money and effort in recent years went into like convenience business models. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so obviously investors wanted to invest in like in another food delivery service, into 20 e-scooter brands, into nicotine vapes,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And I think we should ask ourselves more in what kind of innovations are we investing as an
Mm-hmm.
economy, as a society. For example, lots of our health system is collapsing in many ways, right? And
Mm-hmm.
insurance companies or hospitals, they could benefit so much from automating workflows and freeing the staff to work more with actually with the patients and the humans, or you know
Mm-hmm.
diagnosing diseases with the help of AI. I mean, these are use cases where we as a society will need solutions, because demographic changes, lifestyle problems, economic things, climate change, whatever. So health problems um, are increasing, and there's a lot of pressure on the health system. So I would say there's a lot of potential for human-centered AI, in the sense that it's really AI solutions that are benefiting humanity in the health sector. Or you mentioned logistics. Um, Finding, optimizing workflows, resource flows, making things more sustainable, which will help to tackle climate change, which in the end will
Mm-hmm.
benefit all of us. So yeah, so what are we doing with AI? Is it really
Mm-hmm.
benefiting humans or not? And also the question in organizations, how do we get organizations to transform? And that they are also looking at humans. So what is human-centered AI? I think the same as human-centered innovation, just in the context of AI. And I also said, saying AI is just another innovation from my perspective would be wrong, because the speed this technology develops is insane. Um, the scope which with which it develops, right? It applies to all areas of human life. I mentioned health, but it's also learning. You said leadership, industry, academia. It impacts
Yes.
everything. So scale and scope, um, right? And scale the yeah, so also the amount of money that went into this technology in certain geographical regions like China and US is insane. So just saying it's another innovation would be wrong, but I think we can learn from many transformation and innovation experiences of the past. And especially, I think in Germany, we always very tech-centered, and we could be more human-centered to really get a
Mm-hmm.
holistic view on what's
Yes.
happening.
Yes. Um, You mentioned, some of the venture capitalist players and how they make decision and convenience, looking at probably profitability and short-term return. Um, Now, let's step a bit in the ecosystem, and I would distinguish like macro view and micro view. On one hand, to succeed as a probably startup and new entrepreneur, you would need an ecosystem integration and support. On the other hand, if you look on a macro level, I wonder if you could share some your view and shed some light on. We have the venture, we have the capital, we have the big players like Beiersdorf you mentioned with their labs, or like verticals logistics with their incubators and accelerators and so on. On the other hand, we had the human issues like healthcare, insurance, who are nearly collapsing. How do you see this on a macro level? Who are the players in the ecosystem? And maybe if you could give some good example, because Hamburg, I think, is, if you compare to Eastern Europe and so on, the ecosystem is more mature and it has some history and successful track record. How this ecosystem could be effective, and if you could share example in addressing more human issues and not necessarily short-term profit kind of opportunities.
Yeah, I think so I work at the Hamburg Chamber of Commerce since March, and obviously also had a deep dive into the work of it. And what I really like about it, and that's we have this the strategy for Hamburg, which is called Hamburg 2040. And
Mm-hmm.
the claim or the question behind it is how do we want to live in the future, and what do we want to make a living from, right? So we represent, first of all, we represent businesses. That's our job, right? We consult and represent businesses, and we also take care of this dual apprenticeship system, right? The
Mm-hmm.
examinations of that. So these are the three things that we do. But at the end of the day, everybody who works at the chamber also lives in Hamburg, and I think also everybody working in Hamburg's businesses, or most of the people also
Mm-hmm.
work in Hamburg. So this question, like the core question, has two parts of it, like how do we want to live in the future, and what
Mm-hmm.
do we want to make a living from? And I think, and as far as I know, not all chambers in Germany have that. I think this having really developed a strategy and a vision, where do we want to go, and there are um, targets like net zero 2030 or 2040. I'm not sure about it right now, but like all these issues are in there. Like how do we become more resilient as a city? At the moment, we have political tensions in Europe, unfortunately, but that's also things we as a Chamber of Commerce have to think about. Like how does the city stay resilient in these times? How do we mitigate climate risks, and how does this will this be a livable city? There's another
Mm-hmm.
topic, for example, the 15 minute city, that wherever you live, you get the most important daily needs covered in 50 minutes, like
Mm-hmm.
hospital, doctor's offices, shopping, and so on. So there are many questions like this answered in this
Mm-hmm.
strategy. And what's also unique in Hamburg is, as you might know, the chamber is right next to the city hall, right? So there's an
Yes.
actual, each side only has a key for one side. So, but theoretically, politicians and the business representation, they can meet, and so there's close exchange in that. And another thing that I personally think is where we have an advantage at the moment is that we have quite a stable government, right?
Mm-hmm.
Another 4 years, we have the same two parties getting along quite well, having the same ideas, and working together, right, to find
Mm-hmm.
solutions. Sometimes different perspectives, always compromises, right? I think that's the core of any democracy. But I think um, that's working, and I feel like, and there are other initiatives, right? We have our own strategy, and there are many players, but I feel Hamburg is a city where you can sit together with a bunch of different people. Not everybody has the same opinion, but you can have a constructive dialogue, and everybody kind of wants to go into a similar direction, have a livable, wealthy city where everybody gets a chance to make the best possible life for themselves. So I think that's a
Mm-hmm.
very solid foundation. And within this, we also have a regional innovation strategy, right? Where that kind
Mm-hmm.
of guides Hamburg with certain mm, focus areas, which is health, which is new materials, which is logistics, also data
Mm-hmm.
economy and AI. So there are a few of them. What we could Sometimes you want to be world class in everything, and I think that's sometimes a little bit tricky. We're still still just one city, and I think we could focus sometimes a little bit more. I believe that AI would be a very smart focus because it impacts all the other um, areas like logistics,
Hmm.
aviation. I didn't mention like logistics, aviation, health, and so on. Does
Hmm.
this kind of answer your question, or are you like your more specific things
Yeah,
you want to
I'll
know?
ask for something more. It
Yeah.
shed a lot of light, and I think also for the audience. And it's a good example to have. Usually, I have like business representatives, managers, business owners. Now we have somebody who is connecting the glue between business,
Mhm.
politics, enabling. So I would take any chance to ask question. It's great that Hamburg has a vision, vision statement on both you mentioned. We also know that what was it, the Peter Drucker culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Yeah.
And the other kind of statement is that it's all about execution. The vision statement may stay on the wall. So I wonder if you could shed some light apart from the visions and definition, which has been a lot of dialogue to reach them, I'm sure, also with citizens and between the key players. What are maybe the formats in the ecosystem, the channels, so it's operationalized. So if there is, we live in a very dynamic time. So I guess some of these things have to be updated, or sometimes you need to make a decision whether to invest in A or B, more operational. What are the forums, the channels, the, if you wish, institutions, authorities that would
Yeah.
enable this vision to happen?
Yeah. Uh, I would now go back into AI because that's, for the last 6 months, 9 months, almost 9 months,
Mm-hmm.
what I've been doing, like diving into what's happening in the AI ecosystem, right?
Okay.
Because that's the other part of what we were doing. Like I told you about the journey that we defined, like where do
Mm-hmm.
businesses stand, and we also did the same basically with the ecosystem. Where will they get what kind of support and which stage of the of the journey, right? So if you go to
Mm-hmm.
the KI Kompass Hamburg, or
Mm-hmm.
AI Kompass, that's our website. That's kind of the structure of it. You will see the journey in the beginning, and then it will tell you where to go in the ecosystem and whom to
Mm-hmm.
talk to. Um, and then we can get a little bit more specific. For example, we have the Artificial Intelligence Center, ARIC, which
Mm-hmm.
was funded and founded with the help of the city, and is, um, yeah, it's funded mostly by the city. They get more and more member businesses who also fund it, but they have round about 40 people there, very skilled, some of them
Mm-hmm.
very skilled technical experts, who can help businesses to
Mm-hmm.
implement AI AI use cases or whatever, solve their problems, and they do this for a couple of years, right? So when I mentioned earlier what we are as the Chamber of Commerce are doing, our idea was always to make visible what's already there. We don't need to do it. We are also a team of 4 people, not of 40 people, so we cannot help that many businesses in that with that technical depth. So we never wanted to do that. But then people will find what Artificial Intelligence Center, the ARIC, is doing on our site, or they are also hosting webinar series. There is
Mm-hmm.
the Mittelstand Digitalzentrum, which is yeah, so basically for the uh, a German initiative in many regions in Germany that helps SMEs in digitization. And these days they have a
Mm-hmm.
high focus on AI. Maybe something that we also should mention. Many businesses in Germany also have other issues when it comes to digitization. AI is now the word that often makes them realize that they need to do their homework, right? So, but we have
Yes.
this, we have the EDIH, the European Digital Innovation Hub, which is like European funding, and they should also, as far as I know, be strengthened a little bit in the next years, because we have the Invest AI initiative from the European Union. So there are different players where businesses can go and they can actually get help for free. So that's their
Mm-hmm.
job, and they are publicly funded. What we try to do is, so we, as I said, we don't want to do things that are already there, but we try to do some work in inspiring organizations, bringing them together, and also bringing together the players in the ecosystem as a more neutral organization, right? We are funded by the
Mm-hmm.
businesses. We are not funded by the city, so we don't have any conflict of interest in that
Mm-hmm.
sense. We want to serve the businesses. We also have our vision, which states how do we want to live in the future and what do we want to make a living from. So I hope and I consider myself as somebody with a strong value system, and so far I feel very comfortable in this institution that they really try to make Hamburg a livable city for
Mm-hmm.
everyone, right? So we also are in dialogue with other organizations, also like the social entrepreneurship city. But anyway, so there are many players that are funded by the local government, like the AREG, we have the MDZ,
Mm-hmm.
and so on. And obviously, we also have many consultancies. One
Mm-hmm.
thing that we need to navigate a little bit as the Chamber of Commerce is like when I get this restaurant owner who asks me, "Oh, which consultancy can I call?" Um, I, I can't tell. I can't tell him because we
Recommend.
represent the business, the all businesses' interests, um, and it's yeah. So we cannot just recommend any specific consultancy. What we can do, we in our events we have our experts, and I can say, well, at all past events there was this person and this person, this person, this person's, and they seem to be very knowledgeable, right? There are ways
Mm-hmm.
to get people into contact. I'm also active on LinkedIn where I just showcase people who I talk to. So we try to make the ecosystem, also the private ecosystem, and the players who are very engaged in our yeah
Mm-hmm.
communities visible to the best of our abilities. Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks for giving it a pragmatic spin and the AI lens. That's our core topic here.
Yeah.
And now, as I mentioned, this micro level ecosystems, many entrepreneurs, as they start scaling, they have to grow their team. And here, sometimes they go for expertise beyond the city of Hamburg and maybe Germany. And this is where these virtual power teams come into play to integrate, experts in different locations. But also, I think nowadays, for a reasons of funding, for a reasons of getting maybe some consultancy, you need to operate in an ecosystem as a kind of scaling company. Can you give us concrete examples from like startup perspective? What are the principles, success principles to build or to operate in an ecosystem? And maybe if you could illustrate with some examples, I think that would be useful.
Yeah, I think when we talk about startups, I like working in Hamburg. We are a rich city. We have lots of strength, but we also have some homework to do. Uh, One thing is you mentioned this global perspective. I think generally, like when you look at Berlin, everything re around startups is in English, right? Everybody speaks English there.
Mm-hmm.
In Hamburg, most things are in German, and I'm in touch with quite a few global founders, right, operating in Germany. And it's really difficult for them. So one wish for me for the ecosystem, and we are also trying to do that. Like our vibe coding workshop last week was with Alexander Sakharov. He's from Russia, I think. He speaks German, English, so the workshop was in English, and we now on a regular basis try to offer things in English. Um, so these global founders, we also attract people from, talented people who want to build in Hamburg. Um, because for them, as you said, it's important that they get access to the ecosystem. But when the
Mm-hmm.
ecosystem mostly speaks German, there's a little bit of a problem there.
Mm-hmm.
So we try to push this, and we are like quite hands-on, as you probably realize. We don't just ask for things; we also try to do them if we think they are important. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but there's also one initiative growing very rapidly right now in Hamburg, which is the Global Innovator Circle, founded by Ben Anon,
Mm-hmm.
who is a global founder himself, who went through all these struggles, and he realized, right, there are many of these people who want more events in English and want an English speaking network. And yeah, the Global Innovators Circle, they are doing a great job at the moment, filling this gap
Mm-hmm.
and getting a lot of traction. So we all, yeah, sometimes there are shortcomings, sometimes there are quick solutions to that, but generally we could do more of that in Hamburg. And with that, so there's a little of word of caution that they might not find, but I think, and that's a big learning from me. Before working at the chamber, I was self-employed for th 3 years. The business model that I came up with, I did the mindful startup school. So I also did lots of workshops and on like soft topics. I also mental health awareness workshops for founders because I think they need it. I still think they need it, but the
Mhm.
business model didn't turn into what I wanted it to. But I figured out in my job now that I became a really good networker, and this opens
Mhm.
just so many doors. And I
Mhm.
think many founders, because building your business is such a complex topic anyway, right? You need to build a product, sometimes you must learn how to hire, to lead teams, maybe international teams when you have your development teams in other world regions or whatever. You need to come up with a business model, go to market. So it's complex anyway. So probably you reduce everything that you don't think is necessary. And I think for many, they think it's networking. Although, like just knowing the right person at the right point in time is often so valuable and save you so much time. So
Mhm.
hands-on advice is go out there and get to meet other founders who have walked the path before you. The ecosystem in Hamburg is messy. I'm in it for now 10 years. That's why I know it so well. But like if
Mhm.
you're just start working on your first idea, you don't know it at all. And there are often many institutions and programs that help you and then for free, but people just don't know about it. And
Mhm.
there's still no very structured way to find out. So go out and ask for help. Um, that's a step that nobody can take for you. You also have to do it. But also, I lied. No, I didn't lie, but do it with so I know some people you just see them at every event out there all the time. And for me it's a bit my job. That's why I'm at more events than other people. But at some point, stop going to events, start and focus on building your product when you have what you need.
Mhm.
So find a
Mhm.
balance there. So that's that. It's a little bit messy for international founders in Hamburg. We have some potential, but go out and explore for yourself. And the other thing is that in the specific case of AI, and here I'm a little bit in my role as a representative, we had the AI Startup Hub which for a couple of
Mhm.
years ran programs for AI startups, built this network of mentors, um, and there was a lot of clear support. Their funding ran out in November, so they are restructuring, so they will continue supporting startups. Right now, they don't. And then
Mhm.
we have impossible founders. I think many people in the innovation ecosystem in Hamburg are looking at impossible founders, and mm, I think a lot of traction will be created there. They have some focus areas, which is like deep tech, new materials, also AI,
Mhm.
but they will need some time to get operational. I heard somebody say, like, realistically speaking, maybe in April, May, whatever, that they are really get the engines running. And, when we talk about AI and we now have this gap of 6 months where I don't know where to send AI founders for support, that's a big problem.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
I'm not the guy usually it's like we need to go faster, 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 but we have this gap in the ecosystem right now with the biggest innovation engine we have, which is startups, and we cannot really support them in Hamburg for the time
Mhm.
being. This might change, but right now there I see a big gap. Yeah.
Mhm. Okay, thank you. Very practical. Let's look now in the ethical part of AI, which is kind of also your specialty. We have the European Act, and I guess many of the listeners are more or less aware. Maybe give us kind of a subject matter view. Why ethical AI is critical, and again, what are the top three components?
Yeah. So as you mentioned, we have the EU AI Act. So again, I'm a generalist. I'm not a lawyer, but yeah, obviously that's one of the things that I have to do. I have to kind of look into it and understand it enough to give the businesses I talk to first ideas where they might stand and what could be their next steps. So we have a risk-based assessment there with four risk areas. One is like, for example, the lowest low risk or a no risk area would be something like spam filters in emails, right? Not much that could go wrong. It's just there. Nobody asks you if you want it, but it's in some products, and probably that's also okay. We don't need to complicate things. Then you have low risk areas where probably that would be generating photos, and obviously we also have a responsibility if you generate photos of showing someone in certain situations that could harm their personality or whatever, or um, ruf, their reputation, right? Then you can use that in critical ways. But generally speaking, generating pictures or generating text, you have you should be transparent about it. Like, this text or this picture is generated with AI. Um, then you have high risk cases, and there we are in these areas like health, but also HR, where if decisions are made by AI, these decisions could harm people or autonomous driving, right? And there, the AI Act, you have quite a lot of responsibilities, things that you have to do, make sure that you continuously monitor your system and so on. That's why many people say it hinders innovation in the EU, because especially for startups, things are complicated enough, and for them it might be a valid decisions to say, I don't want to go there. We don't even have the money to, pay the lawyers to understand what we are supposed to do, because in Germany, or yeah, often you also have the advantage that you have these standards like the Dean standards and so on, but still they are also under development. So there is no real guideline that helps you to make sure you are actually conforming to these laws. So it's at the moment there's a lot of confusion, especially in this area. What we usually tell businesses, if you're not sure there, start slow. Start with the non-risky use cases. Start building your capability or with AI. And then we also have the unacceptable risk areas where it's like about manipulating people, social scoring, and these kind of things that where the European Union decided we don't want to do this here. So we have a legal framework, and probably the most sophisticated legal framework in the world. Some people criticize it. Some people say, hey, this might also be a chance. Like AI made in Europe stands for trustworthy AI. Let's see. I believe for sure we need to support especially innovators more to navigate it, to help them navigate this high risk area, because lots of innovation potential. And I mentioned again the health system, HR, autonomous driving, innovation potential lies in this area, but for founders it's not easy to navigate it. And I think it's a good thing that we also for some things said we don't want this here in the EU, like manipulating people using AI. And we, as you know, we had this nice workshop about ethics in AI, because I think we also have to have a responsibility to think beyond what am I allowed to do, what am I not allowed to do. One example that often comes up, and it's a very silent movement as far as I know, is that, you know, people just graduating from university, from everything I hear, have a really hard time in some cases finding jobs. And they are
Yes.
not like official announcements. That's more like, yeah, it seems that the mid-level and senior level people in some areas are much more productive using this tool. So probably there is more than a hype in certain areas. I think programming would be one of these areas for sure. If you know how to work with cursor, I think as an experienced programmer, I think you can do much more than you were able to do a couple of years ago. So yeah, so what I hear, and I'm still looking for numbers. I don't have numbers yet. I don't know if this phenomenon is still too early. Um, is that it's harder for young people to find a job. And I think businesses can do that, but they should ask themselves if they want to do this. Like, where will they get their mid-level staff from in 5 years? I don't know if that's very sustainable, right? Where will they get their senior level staff in five years? Who will pay for their retirement? Yeah, if they don't give people jobs, right? The
Mhm.
retiring managers, right? So these are there we quickly go into ethical questions where yeah, it also gets fuzzy. I don't have all the answers yet. I just saw an interview with the CEO from um, Google, who literally
Mhm.
say we will have to work through social disruptions in the upcoming decades.
Mhm.
Yeah. And that's
Yes.
something I put out here. I don't have a solution to that. I think that's something we also need to discuss openly. If, this narrative that AI will create all these exciting jobs, yes, and I think there will be many jobs that, yeah, we people are not willing to pay anymore if AI can do it. And that's something we need to address and to talk about. And that's an deeply ethical question, I think.
Yes. It is a big one. It is a big one. I just today listened to another podcast of the author of the Social Dilemma movie, who moved a little bit the public opinion a lot about the ability of narrow AI in the social media just by feeding you with what you need. It could manipulate your views and influence elections and so on. And now he was describing it was a kind of a call for all conscious people on the planet to understand the risks of AGI, general artificial intelligence, where it can do any job, any cognitive job of a human better than any human, essentially making all the cognitive jobs kind of redundant. And the ability, currently, the breakthrough, a bit more technical language, is this recursive self improvement, which is not yet the case. But if it could like improve its code by itself recursively in an iteration, it could go once you reach this stage, you can, as in his own words, you could dominate the world economy and therefore dominate also political forces which are related to economy. So it was, I'm a one who optimistically shows what's possible with AI right now to augment people, to be more creative, more productive, and this is really the case. But if you look, and they were quoting, billionaires and founders of these current companies who actually publicly don't say this, but in a private conversations, they are aware that in this race, whoever reached this artificial general intelligence, not just smarter than human individually, but any cognitive jobs, it is a dystopian scenario. It could mean the end of humanity because you could apply it in military, to produce weapons as well as to control the military forces and so on. So there is a dystopian scenario on the table, and call to action for people actually to put more effort to control AI now. Containability of AI is one topic, putting the guardrails. But it looks like that same owners, they just race now in a blind race. I wonder, you already talk about the ethical, but what do you think? It's a hard question and very big question. What do you think humanity and every one of us can do in order to protect us from AI developing in a negative way? Because all will can bring abundance, all it can create a lot of products and services and a lot of wealth for every one of us, but it can go wrong. So if we just spend for a moment, and I must say, ask this question for the first time in podcast, what can every one of us do in order to have more responsible and more ethical AI?
Yeah. Um, there's one little keynote that I started giving, which is a little bit introducing the word that work that I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And I'm starting this with the Gartner hype cycles.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So for everyone who's not like listening, not is not like in technology management, the Gartner hype cycle shows that usually when a new technology comes, the expectations are really high what it can do, then it falls down from this hype, and like everybody's like, yeah, okay, this is crap, it doesn't work. And after a while, we kind of get to realize what it's actually able to do, and To put it like in one sentence, we overestimate what technologies can do in 2 years, we underestimate what they can do in 20 years. And what we see right now is that this AI, the Gen AI hype is a little bit over, and we still have to write our emails if we want them to be personal and good and to know what's actually going on in the conversation, right? Um, but if you look at the Gartner hype cycle, there's a huge stack of technologies that is still coming. Like to mention one, like quantum computing, that like probably we're seeing results in 5 to 10 years. And then when you ask like what happens when you combine quantum computing abilities with the idea and algorithms of AI that we have now, right? So there are things that will be coming, and there are very powerful people whose bet is to throw all the money on these technologies. That's a
Hmm.
fact right now. Like if you look at the US and also the
Yes.
EU and China, everybody is throwing money, and that also means effort. And the smartest people on this planet, many of the smartest people on this planet, they work on AI. That's the reality we live in right now. Do I personally think that's a good idea in all of its aspects? Definitely not, but that's the reality we live in. And I also think there are for to some of these doomsday scenarios, there's a valid point. I think more like the social disruptions are actually the more things that are happening sooner rather than later. And that's why I encourage everybody to get into this, to understand what this technology currently can do, what it cannot do, what we want it to do, and we don't want it to do, and raise their voices. But in order to raise your voice in educated ways, you kind of need to understand what you are dealing with.
Hmm.
That's why I that's why I'm doing the job that I'm doing, and I still can sleep well, thinking that yes, this technology really has a lot of potential to do a lot of harm. Because part of my work and what I'm doing is I will go to the um, feminist town hall in Munich and then talk about how can we get more women into AI, because we have the AI gender gap. Like
Hmm.
as often men are more confident and they go into it, and then they get better at this technology, and they have more power because they use these tools and more productive. So part of what I'm doing is with my colleague Pina, we organize events especially for women, for example, or we do ethics and AI workshops, or we make sure that the Chamber of Commerce will be part of the Responsible AI Alliance in Hamburg, which is an institution
Hmm.
gathering voices of businesses and other institutions. Um, to make sure we have a dialogue about responsible AI, or there was the code of conduct of democratic AI launched from D64 in Berlin, where I introduced our work the other week. So in order to shape a system and shape a technology, you need to understand it and interact with it. So my call to action is understand what it's doing, interact with it, and bring your specific expertise, whatever that is. We need a lot of people who are knowledgeable about the sustainability aspects of AI to get into AI. So
Hmm.
can have a more structured dialogue. Right now, one task that's on my table is to think about, do we need a data center in the north of Germany, or are we discussing this? And a big question is like, yeah, should we actually do that with the kind of energy we are producing here and our net zero targets? Yeah, so that's my call
Hmm.
to action.
Excellent. Very specific one. And two questions left. One is, maybe can you tell us what was your most exciting, exotic experience with AI? Maybe a little story, which could be humorous. It should not be big, but something.
I actually have one in mind. That's I started applying for jobs in November, and I was in Hong Kong in January, and I didn't know that I be getting into AI at that point.
Hmm.
Um, but I was at the anyway, it's like the Hong Kong Museum of Modern Arts, and there was a big wall, maybe 10 meters to 3 meters high, and a projector. And what it would do is it was filming the people standing in front of this wall and
Mhm.
then projecting them into in constantly changing movie landscapes. And I was basically, when you move, the figure in front of you moves, and it kind of morphs with the person next to you. And I remember there was this Chinese lady who she didn't speak English, and I don't speak a lot of Chinese, maybe a couple of words, but we kind of interacted in this art together, and we become one piece of art together. And this was a moment where I was like, hey, any technology is what we make, what we turn it into. So it can also enrich our life. I'm not a techie. Like I actually use little technology in my life. I have my Whoop strap with like a fitness
Mhm.
tracker. Obviously, I use this laptop. I have a smartphone, but I'm not a techie. And then I'm generally probably a little bit more skeptical in when it comes to integrating more technology into our life. But I often come back to this moment and think more about this, like how can we make technology more human and enrich our lives, which also makes means like how can we use it to interact more with each other, also in
Mhm.
3D
Mhm.
settings, right? Yeah.
Mhm. Excellent. Last question, it's a standard, and we touched upon already, but maybe you could give it whatever spin you like. But it is the standard question. What is the ultimate frontier of AI?
The ultimate frontier of AI. Yeah, we touched on it. Is like for me the questions. If it gets to a point where it's smarter than us, can do everything that we do, make its own decisions, how do we get it to like us? How do we make sure it sees us as part of the game? And I
Mhm.
think like if I look at the world right now, humanity has some homework to to do because I don't know, I wouldn't know how to convince it with like the state of the world and some things like with all the wars, the social inequalities, what
Mhm.
we are doing to the planet. And I think that the ultimate frontier of AI is then probably deep self-reflection of what we are doing here
Mhm.
and what we should maybe
Yes,
be doing.
yes. It's along the lines of many other famous gurus and also other podcast guests around, raise it as a child, we're raising Superman or Superwoman. So by example, we live and we don't just say you need to be honest, but be honest and so on. Because currently, as we know, it copying all this blackmailing behavior, there are many exotic cases where AI takes the worst of the human practices and copy it by itself. So raise it by example. And now recently comes this a bit narrow AI, which containability. When you do it, don't do it to do one AI to do all the jobs, but take it job by job, create narrow AIs which are under your control, and don't create the big beast. But we will see. I think we need to do our homework and reflection and be a good example. That's a no-brainer. Next slide.
Yes.
Malte, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much for being so pragmatic, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you for your thought-provoking questions. I always, when I have these conversations, I also learn something about how I view the world. So thank you for that.
You're very welcome.